You know, every time I go here, I leave thinking, I just don't know anything. And I'm thinking, how can you do that? You come, and there's some people here who are experts in their areas, and you fortunately get a chance to sit down and listen to them talk. We've got 5 experts here today. I'm especially hoping to leave some time at the end for questions. If there is no time and you want to get in touch with people, feel free to reach out to me, and I can always connect you with any of these people here. And I think we're almost ready to start. Okay, we've got a few more people coming in. Cool.
We should put string over the back seats. You have to sit in front.
All right, well, welcome. So this is going to be the 3rd time I've done this session, and I think it's actually each and every time I learn a lot of different things about it. There are so many different things that could be considered AI and machine learning. We're going to go through a bunch of them today. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Nadine Krefetz. I'm a contributing editor for Streaming Media Magazine, which means I tend to write about a few different things. I also do program management consulting, and I work in some of the areas that I write on. Today, what happens is that machine learning and AI are possibly more buzzy than ever, and people talk about this. And what we're going to do is really sit down, take a look at how these people here are doing things and what they're doing and why it's important. There's 3 key reasons that you should be in this room. And for everyone else who's not in this room, well, they're losing out, right? So 1, there is a huge amount of data right now. And so realistically, if you want to actually acquire and benefit from your data, machine learning and AI is going to be one very important thing for you. 2, if you are anyone working in the media workflow, you know that you have a lot of complex parts, and in order to put them all together takes a lot. Machine learning and AI will give you the ability to automate and create either cost efficiencies or time efficiencies in areas where you right now don't have them. So that's another reason. And the 3rd reason is that other people are using it. And so you want to make sure that your companies are staying competitive by using a technology that your competitors are using. So anyhow, we're going to go and take a look at some of the very interesting. The people on our panel will introduce themselves in a second. They have projects, products, and research in the area, so they're across the board. Again, we're going to kind of touch on a lot of stuff, and so I invite you later, if you have questions, to come and contact the panelists or myself. So one of the key things that comes up is, what is machine learning and what is AI? So Gabriella volunteered to actually quickly define that. Before we even do the introductions, she's going to take us into what exactly we're talking about here.
Well, AI is the larger definition of any technique that mimics human learning using logic primarily. Within AI, you have machine learning, and this is a subset, and this uses complex statistical techniques to improve the tasks that the technology can do. Within that, you then have another subset, and that's deep learning. And here's where you have algorithms which permit the software to train itself and to improve how it performs tasks. So it's a increasingly smaller definition. So many things could be AI, fewer things could be machine learning, and even fewer things would be deep learning.
Okay, and in fact, each and every time I Google this, I cannot find a definition I like. And I think we probably will find almost as many definitions as there are for people working in the field. Mine was, AI is a computer program whose goal is to solve problems simulating human intelligence, adapting, and learning. The machine learning part is about using data to predict outcomes and continually handle change and create solutions. And some data will obviously be unmanageable by any other way but handling it through this. So anyway, let's get the panel introduced, and I'll start here from my immediate corner. Nikki, why don't you introduce yourself, and we'll just go down the table here, and if you can tell us a little bit about where you are from and what you're doing.
Hi, so my name is Nikki Conley. I'm a cloud solution architect with Microsoft. I work with our One Commercial Partner Group, so specifically with our media partners and building solutions on top of Azure.
Cool. Nathan.
Yeah, hi, Nathan Egge. I head our codec engineering team at Mozilla Research, and this is a team that's working on media formats with the goal of creating, best-in-class royalty-free standards for use on the internet. We've helped make Opus a royalty-free audio codec, WebRTC at the IETF, and most recently the AV1 royalty-free video codec.
Okay, excellent.
I'm Tom Ohanian. I'm at IBM, Watson Media and Weather, and I'm working in the area of AI and ML and how they will change the content creation process.
Field.
Field Garthwaite. I'm co-founder and CEO of Iris TV. And for those of you who don't know, Iris TV is a video intelligence platform. We're focused on applying a lot of these technologies in production environments to drive business outcomes.
And I'm Gabriella Mirabelli. I'm the EVP Consumer Insights and Brand Strategy at Valence Media. Valence Media is a holding company. Within our holding company is The Hollywood Reporter, Billboard, Spin, Vibe, Stereo Gum, Dick Clark Productions, and MRC. MRC is a studio. You may be familiar with some of their content they produce, House of Cards, Ozark, Baby Driver, and we also have a minority stake in A24 and a couple of other production companies.
Okay, cool. Now, I'm going to go back this way. So we chatted earlier about the strategy that you had for the need for these services. So what was driving you? Why start to use and develop machine learning and AI for your business at least?
Well, I would say there's two things. I mean, using it, there's a mountain of data, and if we think of the previous era as sort of the era of data, I would say now is the era of insight. So you need to be able to leverage this data, and a lot of it is, well, there's just so much, it's so complex, but really when we think of it strategically, it's a make-buy decision. Am I going to access things that other people have created, or am I going to make my own internally? And then you're looking at, the resources who know actually how to do the deep learning. And for us, if somebody's already built it, why should I rebuild it just so it's mine? I only want to build something if it can be proprietary. I'm answering really unique questions.
Okay, so that was your strategy. Now, Field, obviously you're going to come at it from a different perspective a little bit. What was your business strategy for starting the company or for further developing in this area?
When we started, we found that the customer experience on platforms like Netflix or YouTube is superior in many ways to that major media companies had, especially at the time. So our focus is on improving the customer experience. And as everyone in the audience knows, you may have kind of a different CMS, different video player, different, DMP, ad server, kind of QA workflow, the ability to A/B test these is very complex, and applying machine learning that actually you can use in production and improve it, and then if you switch parts of your architecture, continue doing so and not lose that data or kind of experience vendor lock-in. Those are the types of things that we sought to solve for, and then we work with many of the other companies on this panel, either as clients or as solutions to plug into that workflow.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Tom?
I think there are a lot of underlying technologies that these solutions are dependent upon, right? And they have everything they range from speech to text algorithms to object recognition to visual recognition to intent analysis, and these are libraries and cadenced in a certain way along with partners, and we work very closely with Iris. You can build things and you can build solutions, and I think when I look at this industry, and I've been in the industry for quite some time at a variety of companies, always transitioning the customer base, it tends to be, reducing the sort of the human tasks. What insight can you glean from the content, and then ultimately, the big question becomes, can systems build content? And I think that's kind of the phasing in that I look at, at our company.
Okay, and as I mentioned, people are coming in from different areas, and Nathan, you're in a bit of a different area. How about you? What was the strategy as to why you started looking at some of this in Mozilla?
Yeah, so I think there are maybe two key reasons why Mozilla's got an interest in machine learning. So one is that my team is developing our own AV1 encoder, and so if you look at video compression technology historically, you get better compression by having more modes where you can operate. And so the goal of using machine learning here is to reduce that search space by knowing something about the scene you're encoding, right? So if it's a talking head or if it's studio quality, there are different algorithms you might use, and by using machine learning, we can actually intelligently evaluate different modes as part of the encoding. The other thing we're doing is we're using machine learning to do kind of innovative things around data processing. So we've got a couple of projects. We have some speech to text and text to speech, but we've also got things like RNN noise, which removes noise using convolutional neural networks, and we've got a very low quality or a low bit rate speech codec based on machine learning.
Okay, all right. And Nikki, you too, a different area. So what about, and both you and Tom have many different areas that you're working in, but the one that you're going to talk about is?
Video indexer. We saw the need to couple many of the cognitive services within Azure into one platform, and that's what Video Indexer brings together. So things like brand detection, sentiment analysis, label identity, so is it a dog, is it a ball, so that information can then be used to monetize your content.
Okay, so realistically, there are any numbers of areas, whether it's doing image detection, whether it's actually working on saving time, but these guys are now going to explain to you some of the areas that they're working in, because that way you'll get a deeper sense of where things are going. Tom, why don't we start with you, and if you can actually give me a little bit of a look into one of the specific areas that you're in, again, since you guys both have so many.
Sure. Everyone knows the value of live sports in terms of CPM and return and audience and reducing that bounce rate and so forth. And so there's a lot of money chasing it, right? I mean, as people change their viewing habits and so forth. And there are a wide variety of sports out there, as we all know. The time delay that used to be in place in this sort of media supply chain is shortening, right? And so it leads you to something, and what it leads you to is, this whole edit at home experience where fewer and fewer people are being sent out to the stadiums and arenas, and content is flowing over, impaired but somewhat beefy networks. The content flows in, and you want to be able to create automated sports highlights for people, and you're just reducing literally the amount of people involved in touching that content, and the intelligence around what constitutes a sports highlight, right? And so you start to use algorithms like audience reaction, intent analysis, gestural analysis, and so forth, along with player stats, and you can start to build very interesting, timely sports highlights. We did a project with Fox Broadcast for World Cup. We had indexed, 50 years of soccer content.
Wow.
We've got some of the architects in the room here, and you were able to pick plays and players and matches and play types, and the system would go and auto-curate highlights for you, and it became an incredibly sticky application, all because of taking all these libraries, but then putting them together in a sequenced way where the viewing experience just geometrically goes way up. And then the last thing I would say is, enhancing video, enriching video. We can throw out all the technology, but in the end, what did it result in? With Field and Iris, and we've seen amazing changes in terms of just enhanced video. A 10 times increase in viewership, a 30% increase in terms of the time spent watching videos, and a reduction of a 7% bounce rate. So when you enrich these things and make them personal, it just extends. So those are some of the things.
So now you talked about the automatic highlight creation. So can you just give me a little bit more background on that? Because I know that we talked earlier about the ability to create highlights and customize them. What happens there?
Sure. So when these large sports matches like soccer, for example, there are companies that will index that game, right? And so according to timestamps and play types, they will provide you with a data feed and that data feed can then get further enriched, right? You can add additional libraries to it. Who is the player? What's a face? What are the stats associated with that player? And therefore, you can essentially use systems to break down, let's say, that first quarter into specific play types. And then they're codified into a list. And then, of course, the human managing director, editor, producer, and so forth can go and look at those things. But there's that sort of pre-logging and ultimately packaging that systems can help you do now.
Okay, so it's not removing the person, it's just helping the editor and the producer go and find content.
Yeah, I mean, we've had this discussion for 30 years in terms of the fallacy of, people losing their jobs. I was on the founding team at Avid, and the concern there was we were going to put people out of jobs. Those people were never put out of jobs. They ultimately inherited a real tough job, which was, being data wranglers and MAM supervisors, and so to me, this just removes menial tasks and giving people much more creative tasks to work on.
Okay, I'm going to jump to Nikki next. And Nikki, you've also got a product that you're working with certain customers with. Can you tell me a little bit about what it does
Sure.
and what it gets?
So I don't know how many of you saw Sunday's Game of Thrones. No spoilers, but there was a Starbucks cup in there. Could you imagine if the post-production would have ran that movie file or video file through some sort of analysis? They would have found that cup. And with that cup, they could have either A, removed it, or B, contacted Starbucks and said, let's roll with this and let's start making some money off of this. And that's exactly what Video Indexer does. It provides insights into that data. It's been done with Endemol Shine out of the Netherlands, who started Big Brother. Can you imagine there's like 50 cameras in that house, and you've got to see, okay, someone's brushing their teeth, don't want to show that, but someone's hiding in a room and they're having a really quiet conversation. Has the volume gone down? Do we now need to put transcription? So how do they easily make those three times a week episodes if they actually use, Endemol Shine uses Video Indexer for all of that. They rely on the content. They've built models to look for these types of occurrences in their content. They have start and stop times. They know exactly what they have to do within post-production with that information.
Okay, so the tagging is extensive and important. And I'm going to actually jump to the end. I want to definitely focus on Nathan later, but we'll jump to Gabriella and Field. And you guys, I don't know if you want to talk together or whether you want to talk separately about, Gabriella, you mentioned a couple of interesting projects that you were working on. So you've got a research project and you've got some active work. So
well, why don't we, the research project is one that we're using our own, we are using our own data scientists and pulling information, and it's to support our movie when we're acquiring IP, looking at comp IP and sentiment analysis around that and looking at performance there. But really where I think that's in its really nascent stages right now. But what we're doing with Iris TV is really, I think, moving the needle financially, and might be, if people are looking to do that, that might be more interesting.
Let's hear about the moving the needle financially, because that's obviously important. So what are you doing?
Well, why doesn't Field talk about the service, then I can talk about how we leverage it.
Okay.
So our most widely used product is Video Recommendations in the market today, and it's compatible with kind of every video player, every CMS in the market. And specifically at Hollywood Reporter and Billboard, they use kind of a complex video stack. They have Google in there. They have Brightcove. I forget what CMS you guys use. I think it's a different one. So we kind of simplify all those workflows and then drive kind of an increase in viewership. Typically, we'll double viewership in the first year. With very large broadcasters, that number can be around 30%, in other cases. But as a result, you have a lot more supply.
Okay.
Those services are ad supported. So when you have a lot more viewership, then as a result, you have more ad inventory to sell. And then we're doing some things that I'll talk about a little later to increase the value of that inventory.
Okay, so first, when you say you're simplifying, what are you doing there?
So, for example, pulling tools out of, say, a video indexer, right? You have all this metadata that has to live inside of a CMS.
Okay.
So anyone who's using or kind of writing machine learning models, has taken courses, worked with Jupyter Notebook and the like, you often are working with perfect data sets.
Right.
In the real world, that's never the case. So what Iris TV does is we're cleaning up, structuring all that data on the videos themselves, and then also on the actual video playback events. So every kind of second-by-second playback, how viewers interact with the player experience, is data that we collect and apply alongside of, say, that enriched content.
Okay.
And then what we're doing is learning, right, and kind of doing deep learning and kind of a few different types of machine learning based on the content, the viewer, and then anonymized data about that viewer. Things like geolocation, time of day, device, operating system, and then we're applying that to kind of constantly improve the performance and matching.
Okay.
And then you learn a lot, right? So if you have 50 videos about the red carpet, you're going to start to understand which ones actually drive the best business outcomes as well, which can inform production and other kind of
exactly.
processes.
I mean, so then, what you have is what are people engaging with more, and then that informs our decisions in terms of what kind of content we're going to be making. And not only that, but what are the lengths? What's really interesting is noting the differences between Billboard and Hollywood Reporter, what their audiences respond to, what days of the week are hotter for them, whether they, are they more tablet or desktop or mobile users, and they're different. And oftentimes you'll have an organization and you'll say, these are the best practices. And that gets you so far, but really understanding people are they want to be served very individually. They want to get what they want to get. It's all about your experience. We're seeing that across all industries. And so by having this service of video that people are going to enjoy, that's sort of step one. But then for us to be educated in terms of where do we take it from there? What are we producing? How can we produce more of it? How can we give them a more delightful experience on each platform? And it's different.
Okay. So, and it sounds especially important because the data that you must acquire must be vast, and being able to apply that and being able to actually make your customers happy with the personalized.
It's so important. I mean, this is the other thing is really simplifying it for the video team, because they're very busy, and how do you translate the data into something that's tactical and actionable, and then they can show a marked improvement, that their KPIs, that it links to their KPIs in a really actionable way.
Okay.
And video is the most expensive part of the business, right? If you're a publisher, right?
Yeah.
And then, obviously broadcasters, it's kind of inherent in the workflow, but even at THR Billboard, it's a pretty big budget, right? For kind of the actual video production. So if you can invest that money more strategically, right? You kind of use that budget much more effectively and just drive better business outcomes.
Okay, so you just gave Nathan a great lead-in. So Nathan, can you tell us a little bit about where you're active with machine learning and AI?
Right, yeah, so I think to your point, the video is the most expensive part, and what we're seeing is that by using some of these more advanced machine learning and AI algorithms, particularly machine vision and things like that, we can actually go in and tailor some of the encoding tools. If you can do scene detection or object recognition, you can then apply good temporal models on some of that motion. That will help you ultimately reduce the size of the stream or equally improve the quality of it, and that might do things like influence how you would plan your ladder of rates, depending on the type of content you have or the type of encoder you have. Now, these technologies are kind of in the early stages, and what's interesting is that, as was mentioned earlier, we have more data now than we had before. So we can actually apply some of these machine learning or deep neural network algorithms, or deep learning algorithms, to the data we have in video in a way that we couldn't in previous generations of codecs, right? So we're actually able to do some very sophisticated modeling, bake those models into the encoder, and then allow you to maybe select from them or do some searching for them. So that's a pretty exciting field.
I mean, and I'm going to follow up on this next question with everybody, but for you, how, you've talked about what you can do now and what you're going to be doing. So how has that changed how you work?
So the research in this space, has been helped by cloud computing, right? So we absolutely can encode far more video than we used to be able to do, and do experimentation on a lot of algorithms in ways that were unheard of even 5 years ago when we were doing this. So it opens up the ability for us to do cutting edge research, try things that maybe haven't been tried before. in particular, one of the projects I mentioned earlier was, well, there are two of them. One was this RNN noise, where we just asked people to randomly just open up the mic on their web browser and give us some audio with background noise. And we were able to train a model to understand and classify that noise, and then we could go back and remove it. And so this is a case where we were able to gather huge corpus of data, analyze it, come up with some models, and bake those back into a playback routine. And if it's open source and open source and presumably royalty free, I don't think there are any patents on it, and you can download this and integrate it into your product, and it lets you clean up audio maybe on 20-year-old recordings.
Okay.
So there's new things you can do with the technology.
I think part of the field is trying to stay in touch with everything that's going on, and especially trying to figure out what's going on in your particular area. So, Nikki, you've got some information here.
I sure do.
Okay,
Sure.
Let's see if we can get
I
this
can
working.
see it on your, do
Okay,
you want to play the video?
I will. Let's see here. Let's see if we've got this here, right?
Just put the last one.
The last slide,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So this kind of shows you what one of our partners did using a video indexer. It's
So-
not displaying.
Okay,
Present me.
present you. So,
Click the present from current slide.
thank you.
Okay, and then see if you can play.
Let's see this.
Oh, it's over here too.
TV has always been the mirror where people have seen the reflections of their dreams. Now you can go through that mirror and touch whatever you see. It's not about watching movies, but about living them. Who is that actor? What is he wearing? How can I get it? Where is that place? Turn your favorite series into an opportunity to discover, to learn the recipe for a cosmopolitan, to order a necklace. Just a simple touch is required. Each scene can be the beginning of a conversation, but always without interruptions, because you can review later. Now you will touch your dreams.
So what's interesting about this is we're no longer targeting based on age or gender. You can add target based on what people watch. So originally, as a woman, you'd think maybe I watch Lifetime movies or I watch some things with my kids at home. No, I'm actually watching Sex and the City, Game of Thrones, any sort of sci-fi thing that's out there. Therefore, my targeting is completely different than what my demographics would tell you. And that's what AI and machine learning can do for you.
Okay, so if I watch Monster Trucks, then they'll give me the right ad?
Exactly.
Excellent. I don't watch Monster Trucks, but I could. And I think one of the key things, that I look at machine learning for is how can something engage me as a specific viewer and having specific interests. So Gabriella, you mentioned earlier you supersize customers. So what is it that is
Well,
important?
I want to just jump in to what you were saying. One of the things, you talked about Netflix serving up a great experience.
Mm-hmm.
They don't look at demographics. They look at clusters of interest, and
Right.
they use the machine learning to do that, because it really isn't about, the demographics were always just a proxy, and so that's so important for people to think about, who are the audience and individualizing it. And so, I'm sorry, your question was?
No, earlier, what I wanted to find out was what are the advances that you're seeing in your particular area and how have things changed in the last year?
Well, I would say that we're in a bit of a turnaround because we just acquired these
Right.
companies in the past year. So I would say there wasn't as much.
Like everyone else in the business,
Right, exactly. And so we're in the process of really understanding who our consumers and viewers are and building on, it's really a wonderful opportunity, really, what we're seeing is we're increasing the number of people on site, we're increasing the time on site, and, people who are staying on longer because they're getting the experience they want. So.
And could you have done this without having AI?
No,
machine?
I would say that that's impossible because you simply wouldn't know. It would be to your point about getting rid of the tedium of work, what it would take for me to have a team of people looking at all the videos and counting and trying to parse what was what, it just would take so long that by the time I had the information, it would be like last month's weather report. It wouldn't get me anywhere.
Okay, all right. Last month's weather report, Tom, that just leads right into you. Not because you know last month's weather, but because you are sitting in an organization who also has a lot of different tools and platforms. What's been the newest things in the last year that you want to talk about?
I think at a macro level, it's acceleration. Acceleration of the technologies, acceleration of how people are going about their current businesses and transforming their businesses. I'm on the Hollywood Reporter site every day. It's a force of habit, and the video that they put up is extraordinary, right? I mean, it's beautiful quality video. They have access to people who are in subjects that I want to watch, and I'm going to stay on the site, right?
Okay.
And so that use of video, personalized video, I think become extremely important. But I think just overall, we provide technology, we provide solutions. Many of us here, ultimately, it's this acceleration factor which is changing all of these businesses, right? I mean, you can see, how Nielsen as a form of currency historically will change and is changing, right? You're seeing the application of AI by large MSO companies. Used to start out with, let me examine the data from these set-top boxes so that I can avoid a truck roll, to now being, what actually are people really watching? How long are they watching? And how do we use that information for our own purposes? And so I just think it's that acceleration that's happening across all these different aspects. That obviously we apply a wide variety of research to.
So, okay, so you've got a wide variety of research, and I know that you work with Fields companies, and Fields, in terms of the last year, for instance, what's new? What are you talking to customers about?
Well, I mean, I think we'd be missing a big topic if we didn't talk about some of the challenges, right, with these technologies, right?
Sure.
So on products like YouTube, for example, where they optimize around a single metric like watch time, it can lead to big problems, right, when they actually don't know what the content is, right? So a lot of what users, kind of machine learning neural networks, are based around is modeling off of kind of your user consumption and kind of against these asset IDs, the videos themselves, which they don't necessarily know what they are.
Right.
They don't want to know in many cases, because it would, the brand safety issues that they'd have would be far greater. It would actually impact billions of dollars of revenue.
Okay.
And so this is an advantage that media companies have, right? So if you have high quality content that's high in demand and you properly manage the distribution of it, right? So if you have an exclusive interview, or you have an episode, and you carefully manage where that actually gets windowed and distributed and drive demand to it, you can actually take advantage and kind of grow your audience. But what's most exciting right now that we're working on is then applying the same kind of tools that we talked about. So with Watson, kind of applying some of the understanding of what's in the videos to then kind of use it. And we built the first kind of integrations into ad servers, where then you can use this data for both brand safety. So you don't have Ultima videos next to the chairman of Nissan who's kind of been ousted, right? So that you kind of avoid those types of events. But also, previously the only way that you could reach a viewer segment, if you knew that your brand kind of had big audiences and kind of buyers on watching NBA or NHL, you actually couldn't target them outside of Facebook or YouTube. So for the first time, we're going to be enabling that at the demand side and kind of making it possible for all of our publisher clients, which will, we believe, increase fill rates and increase CPM rates. So we think that's really exciting. And it's been possible in display advertising, but not in video until kind of very recently.
Okay, so it sounds like the ability to target people is so much further advanced that realistically, if you're watching content that's not been somewhat targeted to you, either on the monetization side or on the content side, that you really may not stick on that particular property. Nathan, I just want to touch back a little bit on what you see in terms of the future. What about, is the encoding ladder going away? What's happening in terms of how is encoding changing?
Yeah, so I'm not sure I can say too much about the future of the encoding ladder, but I did want to just follow up on some of the challenges that machine learning
Sure,
has in the
absolutely.
space that we've seen in the past year. There's been a lot of interest in using machine learned models to do, new codecs maybe for audio or video. And what happens is when you do that and you apply these algorithms sort of, they are done to improve some objective. And if you use certain objectives, you get very strange results, right? You can do some encoding algorithm and you'll try to create this maybe image encoder using machine learning models. And then as you take the rate down, weird things happen, like if there's a notch taken out of a pedal, it will just automatically fill it in, or you'll see very high quality eyes in the picture, but they won't be the woman's eyes, they'll be somebody else's eyes, right? And so there's this question of authenticity that comes up where these technologies no longer degrade in a way that you're used to. Whereas before, when you had poor, a low rate and you were going to send poor quality video, you would expect it to look bad and maybe still roughly resemble the scene. Now it might look great. And so there's a question of like, what is reality when you use these technologies? So there's a lot of interesting challenges that come up.
Okay, all right. Now, I have more questions, but if the audience has questions, we can kind of jump out and answer some of your questions. So we have one gentleman in the back. Before he asks the question, I just want to check, how many people here in the audience, now that you've heard some of what these folks are using, how many people are using machine learning and AI in your companies? Okay, that's a lot more than some of the past presentations, so I'm happy to hear that. And what's your question, sir? If you say the question, I'll repeat it.
Focused on the user analytics and trying to extract what's happening to the user behavior, both on the ads and the content. How is the user engagement changing as the quality changes? Are you guys starting to be able to find those correlations and say, hey, if we actually invest in better encoding, we invest in better delivery, the user engagement goes up and the ARPU goes up and things like that? So can you talk to how quality is impacting the...
Yeah.
So it sounds like the
I can
question is how is the change in encoding and the improvements affecting the user experience?
So I can just share that like one of the biggest factors that leads to like drop off, people like leaving the experience, is definitely latency, right? Between playback, right? That's video, but then often also between like your ad serving events and your video player events. That's one of the kind of biggest layers of complexity in like kind of any video stack. Because you have your kind of video playback technology for the content and your ad serving technology, and often you don't have transparency if there's, say, an auction going on, what actually is causing that latency. So that's one of the biggest drivers we see of drop-off, which isn't directly tied to the codec, right, and playback, but is actually kind of just the overall experience. But that's just data that we track consistently.
And also the better people, just what their bar is for table stakes of what they expect to view is always getting higher. And if it looks bad, they won't stay. So you always need to be meeting that higher bar. You're always reaching.
Okay.
I think that's why the work of Mozilla and Firefox is really important, because everyone expects an experience that's like Netflix or YouTube or Instagram.
Premium,
right? It's kind of like,
got to be premium and fast.
that's the bar now.
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's to replace your television experience, right? And as that changes, people expect that plus more, right?
Well,
and so it's an interesting bar. I mean, I think one of the things that I spoke earlier about acceleration. There's a pro and the con of some of this technology application, right? Pro. So if you take speech to text, parametric TTS, and speech synthesis.
Parametric TTS.
So just speech synthesis.
You need to define it for
All
us.
right. So I record a voice, and I chop it up, and I turn it around so it says something different, right?
Okay.
And it sounds very staccato, right? It doesn't sound right because I didn't say it in that way, right? So this is an age-old problem with digital nonlinear audio workstations. Smoothing, those smoothing algorithms 2 years ago were okay. 2 years later, they're really, really good. Mm-hmm. And so there's a pro to this. The pro is if you're a broadcaster today and you're doing a primetime television show and you're promoting that show, you will create between 200 and 2,000 promos for that episode. It's an amazing number. You use people to do this. You use voiceover talent to do this, right? But you can retype those words, and before, 2 years ago, you need a library of all that speech. Today, you don't need that library, and this is what's happening in that acceleration 2 years later, right? You can retype those words, and it will do smoothing that sounds very natural. Pro, business driver, saves a lot of time, et cetera, gives you flexibility for all your platforms. The con, right? Vigilance. We have to be very vigilant in terms of how this stuff is applied.
Okay, all right, let's just try to make sure we have enough time for other people's questions. Gentleman here.
Yeah, I'm Nikki from Intel. Two questions. One is, what do you guys see are the top use cases for analytics or AI in India? The second question, I see a lot of legal and operational complexities in commercializing analytics. So, for example, legal told us that, to do a face detection on someone, you actually have get a permission from that person. So I cannot just take a video and do analytics and show the results of that.
Okay, great question. So we'll start off with what are the top use cases? We can go down the line here and see, each of you, what top use case do you see?
Well, we're improving our consumers' experience or engagement rates, and so it's any measure or tool that helps us get there.
Great. Okay.
Is the use case for direct to consumer as a marketer or as a broadcaster, kind of as a content owner or as an advertiser?
It could be anyway.
It could be anyone.
Yeah.
Where do we see the most adoption of AI?
Because if we looked at the room, only maybe a quarter of the people rose their hand. So what are the top things that you think are approachable and that people can use?
So I think one of the biggest challenges if you're streaming video is how do you kind of create a user experience where viewers come back, right? Any kind of loyalty. And a lot of that was done previously with cookie retargeting and kind of ID management. So and that was kind of predominated by DMPs and CDPs. So we're seeing that shift, and there was news today about Chrome's browser now is going to be dropping cookies, following Firefox and Safari. So you need to today build first-party data on these events. And so that's something that we see as a super important trend, is kind of capturing that information, the structured data, and then tying it back to the IDs that you own, which then you do have the legal right to kind of utilize in different ways. Whereas with third-party cookies, with GDPR, the California Consumer Protection Act, those are going to go away entirely.
So would you say the use case then you're talking about is personalization?
Is creation of first-party data is the use case from video.
Okay. Anybody else want to volunteer what they think?
Sure.
Good use cases?
So from a content owner perspective, you now have improved search. By having all of this data about your media, you can now easily search through all that information. Another one is facilitating the user engagement. They can then now skip to certain areas that they find interesting within the video. You have the monetization. So you saw in the video that I had about, you can sell merchandise, you can sell commercials. And lastly is things like content moderation. So if there's profanity in there, if there's nudity, things like that shouldn't be in a G-rated film. And those are some of the top use cases that I've seen.
Okay.
I think the natural language understanding application is starting to really gain a lot of momentum. And being able to query these systems, you're enriching the content, you're finding out a lot about what's in these videos, what are they saying, who's in the video, how can you identify all those things, and then you have to still layer on some kind of search on top of that, right? And it's hard, right? I mean, this plus keyword plus this plus sign, et cetera, right? And really, to really democratize it, to really make it something that's, accessible, you just want to ask a question.
So are you
Right.
suggesting then that it's the ability to search and to search content that has a full text available?
I think it's all those underpinnings, right, that Nikki was talking about and everyone else has been talking about, and then layer on top of that, how does a human ask a question? And how can we interpret a question that's asked by a human, to get things? You Google, anything but blue sharks and you get blue sharks, right? That's not what I want, right? What I want is, from my library of content, something, that's indexed. And we've done a lot of projects like that that have been successful. And so NLU is really becoming, a driver for that.
Okay. Anybody else want to voice anything
I'll
else?
just very quickly mention, one of the things we're seeing that's more new or is gaining more traction is this idea of designing your algorithms for like human perception, like defining quality as like what looks good to a human, and using machine learning to actually go in and know, these are limitations in human perception, these are places where we have more acuity, and making sure that when you design your algorithms and produce your content that you're actually exploiting some of those facts. You'll see things like varying quality throughout, the encoding to have higher engagement, you higher quality at the beginning, bring people in, and they'll remember that, and they won't not necessarily remember some limitations in quality in the middle. If you can exploit some of those
Yeah, for example, like
limitations.
human perception, like within 100 milliseconds, it appears to be instant, right? If it's like kind of that.
Yeah, there's some latency.
Like
There's some things you do for latency, but just how we see color, how we see motion, things like that.
Okay, so we are officially out of time. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, because lunch is going on, if you want, I will try to actually ask the panel right now just to address the privacy issue very briefly, but I also want to thank everyone in case anybody does have to run right now. So in terms of, we'll just really quickly touch on this. There's definitely a lot of legal things that come up with machine learning and AI. So how are some of the ways that you can actually manage this so that you are not running wild over people's rights?
Can I hop in on that?
You can hop in on that.
So Mozilla actually, that's one of the reasons why we got involved in creating our own speech-to-text, text-to-speech libraries, is to be able to do this stuff on device. So you no longer have to send your audio off device to have it be converted and cataloged or whatever you want to think is done with it.
Okay.
Those technologies are very, very important, and we're actually committed to seeing those used in certain IoT devices and have done some research in that area to try to push that idea forward.
Okay, very cool. So on device is one way of doing processing to protect people's privacies. Other things that will protect people's privacies that you guys kind of
hashed
think about?
IDs is another really big one, right?
Okay.
So as opposed to essentially using cookies, right, or kind of like shared retargeting technology, having hashed IDs that are secure and kind of have privacy compliant solutions
Okay.
that then you're using to comply with if you're requested to delete that data.
Right.
But also you can utilize it and kind of enrich it and kind of drive business results with it in the meantime. Those kind of two, I think, will be converging in the next couple of months and years.
So we definitely have, the ability to take a lot of data in, to work with it, and then we also have to have the ability to manage it, and manage it in a way that's going to obviously work with all the laws that we need to. The panel's been fascinating. We're out of time, but I think what I want to do is thank you all, and if you have further questions, the panelists will be here for a couple of minutes. I also want to encourage you to send your questions in to me, and I will definitely be able to follow up if you don't have time to stop right now. But thank you very much. I hope this has been an introduction for you into some of these areas. Again, we had panelists from a whole bunch of different areas. I know that people are working in very specific segments, but like I said, I really appreciate you guys sticking around. Thanks very much.